This is February the 26th, 2023, and this is the Global Town Hall. And we have a meeting every month to open a conversation about whatever's on people's minds around the world, especially activists. So I'm about to open the door and let in the floodgates of all these people who want to talk about various global issues. Hello, Joanne.
Hi. Thank you.
Glad you're here. And here comes Peter Wadhams. And I think Peter
Hi.
is, hello, Peter Brogdon. How are you? It's good to see you. And here's Peter Wadhams. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Hi.
You won Joanna already. And here's Pia. Hello, Pia.
Hello. Just come back from Vienna. There was Arctic Science Summit Week, and I spent a week in Vienna, and I just got into Turin about 1 minute ago. I see
okay. Well, give him a good hug, because if you've been away a week, you need to get caught up. Yeah, he told me last time I talked to him, he told me that you were in Vienna, and I thought, well, you're a lucky girl.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a long. It was a long conference, actually.
I was not in Vienna. I was stuck here.
Yeah, Peter was in Scotland before that.
So why were you in different places? I would think that any place Arctic in nature would appeal to both of you.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, but Peter didn't come to this meeting, and I went in my role as president of Polar Educators International. So we had meetings there. So Peter,
you could at least bring him up to date and inform him what he missed.
Yes,
I know. Yeah, quite a lot. Not really. I mean, it wasn't very highly scientifically wasn't a top meeting, so that's why Peter didn't come. But it was nice to network with people. That was good.
Well, why don't you go to a different computer so you can sit down, both of you?
Well, because I just come in and I had to connect because I had to write a poster for a conference in Japan, and I'm meeting with 3 people now. Anyway, enjoy. Nice to see you looking so well.
Oh, same to you. Okay.
Bye.
Anytime, dear. All right.
Bye.
So we have a whole nest of people here already. I should tell everybody else that Peter Wadhams is I think the leading expert on Arctic sea ice anywhere. Of course, I'm
the most overworked expert.
If I could distribute credentials, you would get the number 1. But I'm not the person deciding this hierarchy. But anyway, Pia is his wife, Maria Pia, and she has been off to. She's also a specialist on the Arctic, but more the social end of things. So she's been in a conference in Vienna. So anyway, the rest of you are already here, and I see also Bill Lycum, the folks guy. Hello, Bill Lycum. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
You know, I was thinking about something, Meta. Here we are discussing the state of the world, if you will, but in my field of work, we are up against something that is even bigger than any war that you could imagine, and that has to do with this seriousness of global warming and its impact upon us. If we don't get our act together very, very soon, we could face extinction ourselves.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Peter Wadhams is the man to talk to, because I think, and I'm not, who am I to say, but I think the Arctic and the threat of methane explosions and even the more gradual leaking of methane from permafrost and the Arctic Ocean, all of those things are the scariest aspect of global warming. And Peter, you answer Bill, because here I am talking, and Peter, you should be doing it.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right that the rate of warming is increasing all the time. We're not, the idea that we might be beating it or doing something about it is completely false. We're simply accepting that because rate of emissions is increasing and the world is in a mess because of the war and COVID, we're just giving up, and we've given up, and giving up at this time means that very soon there's going to be a really catastrophic change in the world, the way the world is. And we're not doing anything about it because we prefer to worry about COVID and Ukraine and so on.
Yeah.
Well, all of those are real problems. I want to greet a couple of other people, though. Marilyn Krieger is a pal of Bill Lycom's, because they're both naturalists working on animal critters in California mostly. And Alan Ware is, I think you're in Prague, aren't you, dear? It's good to see you.
Yep, that's correct. Hello from Prague, everyone.
Well, Joanna, to say a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am the founder and executive director of Remineralize the Earth. And for decades, we've been advocating remineralization, utilizing rock dust applied to soils for agriculture, to regenerate forests, and to store carbon and stabilize the climate. And enhanced weathering has come along to bring it much more into the mainstream, I think, in terms of being, realistic strategy. There are some differences between remineralization and enhanced weathering, but they overlap. And yeah.
All right. So we had a show about that a while back, and it's a very important part of the armamentarium to combat global warming, as well as improve the nutritional value and quality of our soil. I'm going to ask Alan to start us off.
Recently, things that we've been working on. So I'm working with the Basel Peace Office, and we highlight youth engagement in peace, climate, and disarmament activities. And we just gave award last month, 3 awards actually. It's called PACEY, Peace, Nuclear Abolition and Climate Engaged Youth Awards. And we had, I think it was like 85 really inspiring youth projects from around the world nominated for the award. This was more than twice from the previous year. We're very lucky. We had 3 donors, so we could give 3 awards of €5,000 each. And it was just really inspiring seeing the incredible activities that young people are doing, smart, using a range of different tools, storytelling, digital methods, various ways of communicating messages and engaging youth in these critical issues for humanity. So we had, out of the 80, we had to whittle it down to 9 finalists, and the 9 finalists all came online. It was an online event. We had nearly 300 people participating from around the world, and the 9 finalists presented their projects, and then everybody who was a participant could then vote on which were their top 3, and that's how we ended up with the 3 finalists. And they were an education program in Georgia, which is dealing with a lot of young people who have come from other countries, from Ukraine, escaping the war, from Russia, and there's sort of tensions between the youth because of the different political perspectives that they've come from. And this was a conflict resolution program in the schools, and it was just having wonderful success in helping break down the animosities between youth that they inherit, from the political places they're from. So that was one. Another one that won was Adopt a Tree, Not a Gun. And that was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this was an basic role plays for children, because children are recruited into militias in the Congo. And in order to educate the children how to resist, how to respond.
Right, this is still happening to children in the
They're still
Congo?
happening. They're still happening. Yeah.
At what age?
Yeah. So this is normally from round about sort of like 8 through 12, young ones, recruited into the militia gangs and child soldiers. So starting with education really, in the schools is really important. And this project was saying, don't pick up a gun, plant a tree instead. So it was providing an alternative and using interactive theatre. And then the third one was storytelling in Middle East and North African countries on climate issues and how that's and how that's impacting. And it was bringing a range of young people from the Middle East and North African countries together for storytelling. So for me, this was really inspiring that you had these are just the 3 winners. The finalists are so many incredible youth projects. And that gives me a lot of hope and inspiration that even when there are horrible things happening, there are still young people who are responding to the challenge and taking forward projects. We're giving them a bit of a help along.
I want to ask you about these, the Russians and Ukrainians who came from Georgia. I hope we'll have an article about the expatriate Russians in Georgia who fled into Georgia in the next issue of Peace Magazine, but I'm not sure of it yet. But what I do hope we will have on this show is a Russian himself, who himself fled from Russia to avoid being mobilized, as they call it. We'd say drafted, but they use the word draft to refer to, in Russia, to the annual call-up of all the 18-year-olds for training or something. But they're not really permanently turned into soldiers. But this mobilization would be where they were calling up 300,000 men to go fight. And more than that, something like 900,000 men actually left the country rather than do so. And as I understand it, there are issues for them, problems for them to find visas or to be admitted as immigrants to other countries. And there's tension. So tell me about the interaction that you mentioned of these people in Georgia, the Georgians, the Ukrainians, and the Russians who come into Georgia. So
I've put in the chat box a link to the announcement of the 3 winners for our award. So if anyone wants to follow up, you can sort of click on there and find out more information about any of those projects. Personally, I'm not an expert on what's happening in Georgia, but it's from the analysis that the project was giving us, and the reason, for doing this education program, it wasn't just Russians who are escaping conscription. There was also, in Georgia, Russians were there previously, and some of them very supportive of Putin's policies, and seeing Georgia as part of the bigger, Russian empire. And so, and some of them, refuse to speak Georgian in Georgia. They'll speak Russian and expect that, Georgia, which used to be part of, this bigger Soviet empire thing, should still be speaking Russian. So you've got these, it's mixed. There's not just, there's not one Russian perspective from people who are there. There are different backgrounds, and there is tensions, amongst those. So having the education programs for youth is really important. This is not just the only one. We for this PACey project, we did it in cooperation with Youth Fusion, which is a really interesting youth-led, youth-initiated network of young people working mostly on the nuclear weapons issue, but with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, it makes it very obvious that you can't just work on nuclear issues in a vacuum. The threats of nuclear weapons are part of this geostrategic struggle and conflicts. And Youth Fusion has started a program which is called the Youth Hotline. And some of the people who are helping set it up are actually young Russians who have left Russia because otherwise they'd be conscripted. But they want to keep dialogue going with those who are still in Russia. and they say the dialogue and contact is still really, really important. And some people choose to stay, some people choose to leave. They're in very different situations. We can't cut down the dialogue. And so the youth hotline is to set up to try and make that more possible, more dialogue between young people, some who are still in Russia, those who have left Russia, those who maybe from other countries, and keep the dialogue going of young people, in a respectful environment, to be able to, again, break down these barriers that have been not created by the war, but really reinforced, by the war.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Please tell us, if we put some information in the chat box about that hotline, because I had not heard of it before, and it sounds like exactly the kind of thing that I'm trying to encourage, or not even do more than encourage. I want to start something comparable on the channel that we are using now, Project Save the World's channel on YouTube, because I would like to set up a conversation in Russian, hosted by a Russian speaker, a political scientist, or somebody who's really knowledgeable about political structures and so on, to have the expatriate Russians be in conversation about the kinds of changes that they need to make in the government system in Russia once they get rid of Putin. Because, the people in Russia are not in a position to talk about it very well. They can go to jail, or they can be certainly repressed for even bringing up the subject. And but people outside the country can call home, and they do. But as I understand it, many of the people living outside the country have just given up hope of talking intelligently with their parents, let's say, back home, because they don't get along. I mean, I know one young woman I just talked to this week who's lived now in Canada about 8 or 10 years, and she says that they avoid. She calls her parents, but they don't talk about the war because they think that she's been brainwashed, because she doesn't support the war. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are apparently cautious about bringing up a subject that is so fraught. Anybody else on this issue?
I had a quick follow-up on that, Meta, and thanks for raising this. So I put in the chat box the link to the Youth Fusion network. They are at the moment setting up this youth hotline. So there's nothing online about this yet. But you've had a lot of experience in your past with engagement and dialogue with Russia. And I was just wondering whether, I could suggest that one or two of them join one of these town hall meetings, and you could share your experience. I think they would learn from it, and they can give a little update on how they're going with this project. Or
I can do a straight talk show with them specifically about their issue. Because for one thing, as young people, they may not want to be on the same show with people. I don't know what people you're talking about, these young people, but there are, close to 1 million, or maybe over 1 million men who fled the country after September whatever it was, when he announced this mobilization. And within days, they fled the country. And these people, I think the challenge is to overcome whatever, I don't know what it is, but Russians, by and large, have not been big protesters, and they've not been sufficiently critical over the last 10, 15, 20 years of Putin. But getting them engaged politically with the responsibility to change the structure of their governance is going to be very important, and I think holding certain kinds of meetings online will be productive. So I'll definitely think in terms of setting up a specific conversation with these young people about what they have in mind. Yeah.
Okay, I'll introduce you to them by email after this call.
Okay. Excellent.
Good.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Nessa.
you. Yeah, now who else has something to say? Marilyn, you want to bring us up to date on your cats?
Sorry, what was that about cats?
Well, she's a naturalist who looks after various kinds of wildcats in California and in the wild.
Right now I'm at my mountain home, and I'll tell you, the weather, talking about the environment, which Bill was mentioning, it is the snow here. We've had such unbelievable snow. We've had floods. We had all sorts of things. We had tornadoes. It's just been ridiculous, awful.
I'm sorry, is this all over California, or you're in Northern California, right?
No, it's all over California, but where I am, we got hit particularly hard in this little, this house is in a very small insular community, which is not near any large towns. And so the roads are blocked, and there have been, landslides and snow slides and trees down. It's lightning strikes right near me at one of my neighbors who's about 2 miles away. It is unbelievable what's been going on here. And as far as the what's going on with our mountain lions, our local, unfortunately, there's a lot of pushback from people, and my group is trying to educate, or is educating people about the importance of them, that they're not going to hurt them, the people. And what's happened is that, for instance, a mountain lion, supposedly, I'm not absolutely sure because the woman's tale, her story keeps changing whenever she talks to me, said that a mountain lion took a dog right from, first she said her arms, then she said a leash, and then she said in her backyard. It goes on and on. We don't know. But what's happened is that she's now saying that my group, Fish and Wildlife, and another group is purposely dumping mountain lions. And I mean, it's gotten to be quite controversial. So next weekend, we're having a big panel. It's going to have to be by Zoom for mostly safety reasons, where we're answering all the community's questions and saying, well, this is, there's really only 40 to 60 in the whole Santa Cruz Mountains, that people are seeing the same ones over and over again. So it's gotten very difficult. Right now, it's very difficult. And hopefully, I'm part of a wildlife mitigation group. So hopefully we'll be able to, telling them facts and, answering their questions and listening to their concerns, hopefully we'll be able to kind of calm everyone down. But the weather has a lot to do with this. The fact that we're building into their habitats and making trails into their habitats, all these things are influencing all the wildlife.
So they come into your habitat as a result in retaliation. Is that what's happening? I mean, are they more aggressive or more expansive in their domain than they used to be?
The people or the animals?
I'm saying about the animals. Have they?
The people.
I mean, are people grounded, or do they have a basis for worrying that they're being that the animals
Yes.
are coming to get them?
Yes, there is some poaching, correct. And now I understand the concerns of some of the ranchers, because although it's not just mountain lions that's taking out their livestock, it's also coyotes. They do a lot of this too. They all have to eat. And unfortunately, a lot of the blame is being put on the mountain lions, even though they're not responsible necessarily. They are for some. Of course, there are things people can do to protect their livestock, whether they're doing it or not, something else. But unfortunately, right now, the mountain lions are becoming kind of the target for everybody to, take their angst out on. And there is some poaching. Also, Fish and Wildlife.
tell me what you mean by poaching. I think of people.
Yeah, so
and people killing animals. Are you
well,
poaching as animals killing people?
in California, it is now illegal to shoot mountain lions unless you have a deprivation permit issued by Fish and Wildlife. The only reason, suppose in theory, that they would issue that is if they can prove that a lion has taken out livestock or is a threat to people, has, gone after dogs or whatever, then, repeatedly. But they look at, so they're supposed to look at the whole situation. So for instance, are the animals outside in the evening, at night? Are they protected? There are lots of things to look at. How close are the animals coming and if people for threatened people feeling threatened or whatever. But that's the only time that supposedly they're supposed to be able to kill a mountain lion. And that's through a deprivation permit issued by Fish and Wildlife.
And there are more occasions where people have reason to apply for such a permit now. Is that right or not?
I'm sorry, say that again, Meta.
I say there are more occasions where the animals have attacked than there used to be. Is that right?
Is there more?
More times. Are there more animals attacking wildlife or dogs? Or
No, not really. No.
It's just people are more worried about it neurotically. Is that it?
We haven't seen more, but the thing is that people are so emotional about it. So, for instance, one rancher posted, which he blamed it was so bizarre reading this thing. He blamed all of his chickens, his everything that have died. He blamed on mountain lions. Of course, the skunks, will take them out. He will take out chicken, And then he also somehow or other, and I wasn't able, it was a classic email. He somehow or other tied the drug cartels into it. So this is the kind of, so it's all very strange. So at that point, we decided maybe it's better if we have the meeting on Zoom.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good for you.
So that's what's going on in California.
Okay, well, you and Bill work together and keep me posted next time on how your meeting went, whether you have straightened people out. Peter Waters, can you explain why it's snowing in California, all over California? I knew it was a little bit, but I didn't know it was everywhere.
No, it's snowing in Turin at the moment. That's unusual as well.
Your town in Italy. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, and that's rare, huh? Well,
it is, yes, for this time of year. But the big thing that's been going on has been the sea ice in the Arctic retreating rapidly in the same direction as the sea ice in the Antarctic is retreating, which they should be working in anti-phase, and when one increases, the other decreases. But in fact, they're both decreasing together at the moment. And
so what's your theory? Why would that happen?
Well, there isn't a theory. There isn't. It's just why the hell is this going on is the theory. But whatever it is, it's in fact causing very large amounts of water to be lost into the ocean and increase the rate of sea level rise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now you've got to theorize because we're depending on you. There must be some reason for this to be happening. Now let's see. This would be a time when it should be melting Antarctica and freezing the North Pole, but it's the opposite. It's doing both, huh?
It's doing both at the same time, yes. And
and you have no idea why it be. So the puzzle would be why the northern hemisphere would be freezing. I mean, warming now. But do you think the warming of the sea ice could have any bearing on why it's snowing in unusual places, like California?
No, I think that's one of these extreme weather events where you can't simply explain it. But the sea ice increasing at this time of year in the Arctic that's seasonally what it should be doing. But the sea ice increasing, the decreasing should be what it's doing. It's as spring comes along. But in the Antarctic, the area should be increasing, and in fact, it's decreasing. And that's because some fairly vital glaciers, like the Thwaites Glacier, are actually breaking up and beginning to disappear. So that's making a big contribution to global sea level rise. And so we have to really watch the Antarctic now as being the place where some drastic things might be happening.
That Thwaite, tell us, if you will, I've forgotten. This Thwaite glacier is something crucial about that, because if that is that the one that's out over the water? It's kind of sticking out over the water, and the water is kind of underneath, undermining it. And if it breaks off, it's going to be a whopper, and it's going to raise our sea level by a lot.
Yes.
How much of a rise in sea level would occur if that Thwaite glacier breaks off?
Well, of course, people are not prepared to say, especially people who work for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but it would be something like up to a metre of loss if all of the ice in the ice shelf breaks up and drifts away. You could get perhaps a metre, which is a big, and that's a metre. That's globally, which is a large chunk of extra sea level rise for all the cities and of the planet, and all of the everything on the planet is going to have a.
Would that be enough to make New York City, the streets full of water?
Well, it would make, for instance, some places uninhabitable, like New Orleans. It would make other places be flooded when they shouldn't be, like Venice. In Italy, we're really worried about Venice because the amount of extra water that would come from the Thwaites Glacier breaking up would really mess up the high water in Venice, just at a time when they finally got the gate system working, which is supposed to prevent flooding from high water, high tides. It's taken several years to build with corruption and so on. Now it's finally actually been connected up together. It's at a time when you're getting this big effect, which it may not be able to cope with.
Oh, okay. Here comes my friend Alexei. Hello, Alexei Brokarenko.
Hello.
Very good to see you.
Hello, Meta. Hello, dear friends.
Yes,
I'm
I
here.
want to introduce you to Alan Ware, because in a way we've been talking about your situation already, and we may have another person who's also fled from Russia to avoid being conscripted, and that is Konstantin Samoylov. But I don't know whether he's going to join us or not. He's up against his own time frame. But Alan Ware is in Prague, and we've been talking a little bit about a meeting that he held with young people who are concerned about warfare, especially nuclear warfare, and people from Georgia. Alan, you and Alexei, explain to him, because Alexei is a Russian interpreter who left as soon as they were going to catch him and make him go to war. And he went to Istanbul for a couple of months and then went to Warsaw and is living in Poland now. Alan, why don't you tell him what happened with regard to the disputes and conversations that you had with Russians in Georgia, and versus, if I can say the word versus, Georgians and Ukrainians in Georgia.
Well, hello, Alexei. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Education program for youth in Georgia, which is dealing very much with Ukrainian and Russian emigres and young people from, those nationalities and backgrounds, and some of the conflicts that happen with the youth because of the conflicts that happen, at the political level. And the second one I mentioned is a cooperation we have with Youth Fusion, which is set up by young people, and they are engaged very much in the nuclear disarmament field, as Meta mentions. And Youth Fusion, I didn't mention this earlier, Meta, Youth Fusion last year won the Gorbachev-Schultz Legacy Youth Award, which was set up, because, Gorbachev and Schultz crossed the barriers in the Cold War and started dialogue and started building respect, between those who wanted to move forward, both in the Soviet Union and in the United States, and had some success, and helped very much pave the way for the Reykjavik summit, for example. Anyway, there is an award that's set up in their honour, and Youth Fusion has got it last year for the work that they're doing for engaging youth on these issues, and including across the barriers or the political divides. So one of the projects they're working on at the moment is not set up yet, they're developing it, but it's led by a young graduate student who's just left Russia because it's too difficult to go back. He could end up in the army, plus some others not from Russia, is called the Youth Hotline. And it's sort of based on the idea of that communication hotline between the Soviet Union and the United States, which continued for a while between Russia and the US. I'm not sure if it's still in existence now. So those are a couple of projects. And as I said, if you're interested at all, then we can share contacts. And what I mentioned to Meta is that she might be interested in having a conversation with the young people who from Youth Fusion, who are setting up the Youth Hotline project, because Meta's also got a lot of good experience in dialogue, across the barriers, across the political divides.
And one of the things that I'm
Thank you.
occupied with, Alexei, you can sort of give your impression, is to what extent when people leave the country, leave Russia, and they stay in touch with their families and their friends, to what extent do they continue the argument, if you will? The people, the people I know basically say, I've given up trying to convince anybody, and they just don't argue anymore. They just talk about the weather or what they're eating or something. How much is that the prevailing attitude of people in your situation, people who've had to leave the country?
Well, it's all different. People are different. I'm still trying to convince people whenever I can. I spend a lot of time, my spare time, in discussions, in trying to really get that propaganda out of people, be it in chats, in forums, online, offline, mostly online, of course, because here I haven't met anyone with pro-war views. Actually, but some people really, the people I know here, those who were active, they keep being active. Those who were more into their own business, be it work, be it journalism, be it something else, they keep being the same. So it's more or less the continuation of what used to be in the home country.
Mhm. That figures, I suppose it does. Okay. Well, thank
So,
you.
but people do some work here. Yesterday we had it was Saturday. On Saturday, so it was February 25, one day after the first anniversary of the beginning of the outbreak of the war.
Mhm.
We had a gathering in Warsaw. There were some 100 people, which is not too little for a place like Warsaw, because most Russian immigrants went to Tbilisi, to Yerevan, to Tashkent, and
Oh, really? So,
So we-
so there are not as many in Warsaw as your scanty group. I didn't. I'm surprised. Are you any less welcome there than you would be in Tbilisi, let's say?
not at all, not at all. So the meeting had full support. The protest had full support from the government. The police was there. The police was watching. It was guarding the protesters, like it would have been guarding Belarusians, Ukrainians, or whoever else. We had posters. We had microphone and loudspeakers. We could deliver speeches. Polish people, Polish dissidents joined us. Some of them spoke in Polish, but most spoke in Russian. They uttered words of support to Russian protesters, to Ukraine, to Belarus, likewise. But I think in that meeting, some people could have been Ukrainians, some could have been Belarusians, but mostly they were Russians. Because the Ukrainians had their own march, their own protest the day before, on the very date, on February 24.
Mhm.
So it's not too little.
But did any who joined them, or did they not ask for anybody who wasn't Ukrainian to participate in their demonstration?
There were some Russians in that demonstration, but during that meeting yesterday, it was mentioned that there was a problem. Russians during the demonstration on Friday, they could not identify themselves as Russians in the Ukrainian demonstration, in the Ukrainian march, because the Ukrainians didn't want any Russians whatsoever. Which a day later, yesterday, which was mentioned as a mistake, because these Russians are not pro-Russian. It's not pro-Kremlin, not pro-Putin. Even the flag is different. It's not white, blue, red. It's white, blue, white. It's the new flag. The red is removed from that flag. Yeah, it's a new flag.
Who
White,
put
blue,
that
white.
up? That's an interesting idea. Well, what group of people would dare do something like that?
Well, I don't remember who was the author of the flag, but the fact is that the flag is banned in Russia, so you can't you can get problems with the police, with the law, if you display that flag in Russia. It's officially it's classified as extremist flag.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a much needed rebranding of the country. If we're ever to build a new country, which seems more and more a necessity.
Well, how much of a dialogue is there about exactly that? That's what I think is so important, is to get people really planning, because what happens when is so often, like, for example, what happened with the Arab Spring, these big demonstrations, and all of a sudden they said, okay, here are the keys, you take over. And they, so these guys were in charge all of a sudden, and they hadn't a clue. They hadn't prepared what they wanted to do once they got power. So I think it's really important to think it through and to have this kind of dialogue going on right now. But I wonder, I'm not aware that there is that much. would you say that there is a lot of conversation about the specifics of how to change the Russian government?
Well, there is some dialogue, but it's not structured, and there are groups detached from each other who are engaging in that dialogue. For example, here in Warsaw, there is a village near Warsaw where the so-called Russian Parliament, Free Russian Parliament, has met recently in February for the second time. The first time was in early November. The so-called Yablonna, that's the name of the village. But that parliament, which includes some former members of Russian parliament in the previous times, in the democratic times, in the 90s, some other prominent opposition leaders. This parliament, you could say shadow parliament, it lacks recognition from many of the opposition leaders, many of the other opposition groups, because of the "who are you" question. So no one really has elected those people to be representatives of either the opposition movement or the country itself. So, of course, most of them have reputation as dissidents, as prominent opposition figures, but there's always lots of discussion on not on the subject matter of how we could build a new country from scratch or from a certain point, but who those people are, who entitled them to be representatives, who entitled them to sit on the parliament. That's what consumes a lot of energy.
Yeah, okay. Well, I could see where, but it's good to have any conversation going. I guess the question that would occur to me is there must be clusters of different leaders or different groups of oppositionists who don't fuse, don't mix together, don't amalgamate. Some of them would be, I imagine, people who were followers of Navalny. Some of them, I know that Hodorkovsky probably has some followers. I know that Gary Kasparov has some followers. Are these different clusters of opposition, or is it organized? Are the cleavages between different groups based on particular issues or controversial topics rather than the names of their leaders?
Now, the cleavages are not too big and not too deep. They're not deep at all, because the consensus is that there are several points of consensus, several important points. No, of course, one of them is that Putin must go. That's that the wars must stop. But one more important consensus, which is not the against type, but it's for type. It's a consensus over the parliamentarian nature of the coming Russia. The future Russian state should be a parliamentarian republic. No more. There is little discussion on the point, because it's kind of a very widely accepted fact that a presidential republic, a strong presidential authority, inevitably would lead to a new incarnation of Putinism, Stalinism, or whatever. So that was the idea, was, I think, introduced by Khodorkovsky, but then in one of his articles, Alexei Navalny also supported the idea, and now most of the people subscribe to the fact that the parliament should be the strongest center of decision making. However, there are opposite voices and that's good. The voices that recall us that, for example, the Nazis were elected in a parliamentarian republic. And the mechanisms of how this could be done should be carefully studied. Actually, I would like to a little bit unveil my future article, which I would like to publish
In Peace Magazine.
Yeah.
all right.
I'm trying to hone the idea to like make it more, a bit more articulated. How we could prepare, how we could identify a prospective Putin or a prospective Stalin and prevent a strong leader with strong trends from really becoming a dangerous dictator. Where is the point of no return?
That's an interesting one. You're going to give them a test or something?
I'm trying to bring this into a little bit of a system, a little bit of a. I'm trying to give it some wording because it's really important.
Well, it's really important, but I mean, I'm not sure that I don't know whether it can be done. I mean, a lot of people thought that Putin was just terrific when he first came in. He certainly didn't look like the guy he's become. And even,
definitely
good democratic-minded people thought that he was a big improvement. So he wouldn't have been spotted, I don't think. Yeah.
Under certain conditions, I think it depends very much on the conditions, because many people who are predisposed to not listening to the opinions of others, or not who like to make decisions on their own. Like if the system does not put any checks on them, not any balances on them, they're in a big danger of becoming authoritarian leaders, and ultimately, when they're long enough in power, this is a risky situation which could bring us to a war if there's no check on them.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like you're making it a personality issue. Do they have certain psychological traits that would predispose them to becoming dictators?
That's of course.
Actually, many of the very traits that would predispose them maybe to becoming dictators would in certain circumstances be regarded as the most admirable traits. For example, I'm thinking of Aung San Suu Kyi, who, when the first part of her career, she was a saint. I mean, I glorified her and thought she was absolutely magnificent, because she did have the courage to do things like when there was a group of military people threatening her, she walked in the road right straight to them, talking to them. And she
definitely,
I mean, that kind of courage and strength is, what made her glorious. But then, when she got into power or felt she had an opportunity to persecute some Muslims, and some of the Rohingya, and God knows who else, her strength of character becomes quite a personal quality. Maybe some of the other people here among us maybe have some ideas how you would sort out potential leaders and identify the ones that you shouldn't want to bring to power. Does anybody else have an idea about how to solve that problem? No? Peter Brockton's shaking his head. Let's see let me put this on gallery view. So those of you who may think you have something to say on the subject can put up your hand or speak. I think it's an interesting question. But to me, yes, Peter. Yeah.
I was just thinking of what you'd said initially, that a parliamentary system is the only way to go. And that's in order to avoid sort of thugs and dictators taking over. So, I mean, maybe that is the answer. Although, we have a parliamentary system in Britain that we're not particularly proud of.
That's right, yeah.
But it should act as a protection against a takeover by totalitarian systems. And So if you can do that and bring, but of course, can you do that in Russia? I mean, given, and has it gone too far towards a sort of dictatorship type system to go back to something parliamentary, which it never really was in the first place?
You could ask, of course, do the Russians ever really want democracy? And then there's another question, which is one that haunts me, and I don't know whether I want to bring it up here, which is that I think democracy is failing in a lot of places. Exactly, you know, you mentioned Brexit, and you mentioned, you know, the other things in Britain, and we've had Trump, and there are lots of democratic countries that I see the people are disenchanted and disappointed in what is really still a democracy. I mean, it was legitimate that, you know, that Brexit happened. There was a real vote, and Trump really was elected, and so on. So democracy doesn't always work very well nowadays. And I'm much more in favor of doing something like a citizens' assembly. And it would be a much more dramatic version of democracy, something that we haven't had very much of since Athens, or, you know, this, Greek city-states, where they actually took well, it'd be like selecting juries today, where you just take by lottery or something, you draw the names of ordinary citizens and put them in charge for a while. And so the decision making is done by a cross section of the population, but they have plenty of opportunity to discuss and debate and get advice and so on before they make decisions, as opposed to something like a referendum, where people so immediately go to the voting booth and make their decision without having done any foresight. I mean, that kind of grassroots democracy, where there's no deliberation in advance of voting, I think is not working. And I do believe that the election of politicians to Congress or Parliament nowadays, it's fallen under the control of big money and other forces.
Right.
And also, I mean, a lot of the decisions are simply so complicated that the people elected to Congress don't know enough and make, you know better decisions than somebody in the street. So here I am fulminating, and make me shut up, please. Somebody.
Go back to the occasion when Alexei joined us.
Uh-huh.
Wadhams was talking about the Thwaites Glacier, and I just wonder about the following thought here, that I've recently read a paper that was really confirming the way in which Lake Agassiz emptied itself into the Arctic Ocean and brought about the cold spell, the Younger Dryas cold spell. And just sort of thought again, how big would Lake Agassiz have been compared to the Thwaites Glacier? I think it must have been quite enormous, hasn't it? Wouldn't it have been?
Yes, it was huge. And in fact, what we've been talking about on another topic here has been, can we preserve the ice in Hudson Bay? And of course, Hudson Bay used to be where Lake Agassiz was, so it's anymore.
It's just the way in which Lake Agassiz draining out, which must have happened over quite a long time, had such a big effect on a lot of the world's weather. And now we're thinking, what is the Thwaites Glacier likely to do? And it's going to be very different, because the whole business of, and as you've said, recognizing the effects of the causes of melting ice can change the weather in all sorts of peculiar ways, such as producing heat spells in northern Ontario and snowstorms in California, southern California too.
Yes, that's the frightening thing with the situation at the moment, is that you have had a change going in one direction, and everybody's not happy with it, but they realise that it's nasty, but it's leading in a particular way. And one of this was the loss of sea ice in the Arctic. That's been going down all the time. We've got, in fact, data showing how much is lost each year, and it's a steady decrease in sea ice extent. So we'll know when it's likely to disappear and give us a blue planet, and that's all. Well, it's not cut and dried, but we know how it's going and how the direction it's going in. But then suddenly, the Thwaites Glacier starts to disintegrate, and that was completely unexpected. And we don't know how fast that's going to go, whether there's going to be a kind of a huge amount of broken up ice going into the ocean. It's suddenly an Arctic sea ice situation that's even worse and unexpected, and happening at the other end of the world and happening at the wrong time of year. So there's suddenly the ice world has become a mess from being something that was more or less predictable. So we
like world politics too, isn't it?
Yes. Well, yes, and so all of our attention in study of ice should be looking at the unexpected changes, and that's this change in the Thwaites Glacier and destruction of that floating ice sheet.
Alan, where you have your hand up, are you saying goodbye? Are you?
Sorry, such interesting conversations and wonderful people, but I have to leave. But I look forward to keeping conversation going. I'll follow up by email with you, Alexi, and send you the contacts for Youth Fusion People Meta. Thanks so much, and see you again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, it's just that things that are happening now are unexpected and are potentially leading to very serious consequences, which could involve large, rapid changes in sea level, but weren't predictable. Whereas the retreat of Arctic sea ice was predictable. I mean, it wasn't properly predicted by the governmental body, but the scientists who were studying it knew what was going on and knew how fast it was happening. And we suddenly got blindsided by the other pole doing the same thing or doing a similar thing, which we didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still, to me, amazing to contemplate the effect that the draining of Lake Agassiz had by bringing all that fresh water to the surface of the Arctic Ocean and just changing the way the North Atlantic changed. And these are the big changes that can happen in the world's climates. And of course, we've got the conversation seem to be going with the big changes that can happen in world politics. And this is one of the reasons I've been concentrating on what you said and listening to Alexei and talk about what might happen, what we hope might happen to change the set of world politicians that we have at the moment.
Well, we still have to be careful about understanding, because when Lake Agassiz, the draining of that was first studied, there was the physicist who studied it first, whose name I'm desperately trying to remember, except he was world famous and is now dead. He said, well, all of that ice came out of Lake Agassiz as an armada of icebergs, and he gained he thought the ice in Lake Agassiz broke up and into icebergs, and then all the icebergs sort of came out together like going down the drain, and that was a tremendous impact on the world. So this armada of icebergs, the person who thought it up, Wally Broker, yeah, he was the very, very famous, but he was also very, very self-opinionated. And this armada of icebergs turned out not to have existed. But it was a dramatic thought. Suddenly the Baffin Bay is full of thousands and thousands of icebergs that are all coming out together and causing mayhem. But in fact, that didn't happen, at least as far as we know.
Well, was the effect done some other way, just fresh water rushing out, or if there were was no armada of icebergs, what did happen?
Well, it sort of something like it happened, but in a more decorous way, not in a catastrophic way.
All right. Well, okay. I want to greet Charles Salber, who's in Vukovar, Croatia. I presume that's where you hang out. How's everything in Vukovar, Charles?
Well, we're kind of going crazy, to put it mildly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Alexa can, between Congo, Nigeria, Liberia, Ukraine, Turkey, I think we don't know where to start. All the reports we have to write and all the groups we're trying to get together. I'm on the verge of writing a letter to people I know in Turkey and North Syria and all of that stuff to try and get some training groups going. I would really like to do that. And if anybody here knows anybody, please write to me and we will write them a letter, because the amount of trauma there is incredible, and we're going to have to. We really have to increase capacity there to deal with it, especially with all the refugees in southern Turkey. That precisely where the earthquake hit is an area where there are huge numbers of Syrian and Afghani refugees.
We should explain for anybody who hasn't been listening in previous shows that you're a psychiatrist doing group therapy for people who've been through war trauma and
education. Most important thing we're doing is educational groups on how to deal with it. And then we're faced with, well, where do I start? I mean, Congo, the street kids. Huge numbers of children coming onto the streets. Their parents are throwing them out. They were former child soldiers. Nobody wants them. Yeah. It's extremely sad and extremely worrying. And this is going to go on to a new generation. We know the transmission is going to occur. So we're dealing with a couple of groups in Congo and Burundi. We don't have the money really to do it. I'm doing what I can. I'm having groups and groups and groups. We're dealing with, on top of that, we're dealing with a group of Liberian drug addicts. This is second generation after the Civil War. And they're the result of the transmission of trauma. Nigeria, you've heard about the elections this weekend and all of that stuff that's going on. So, and I'm not getting to write the manuals that I want to write. We still haven't written our annual report for 21, let alone 22. In short, we're going quite out of our heads here. Also, this place is exploding slightly. and nobody hears about it, but I was in a restaurant on Friday. And in this particular restaurant, there are a lot of war veterans from 30 years ago. And they were talking very loudly, so I had my earphones on. And when I took my earphones off, I heard, aha, this is why you're screaming and you're drinking as much alcohol as you're drinking, because they are traumatized and nobody has done anything about it. And it's worse in Bosnia. So the whole world is going bleeding out of its head, and there's no capacity to deal with it. And my colleague Sandra and I are going absolutely.
You know what I would suggest? Why don't you get Sandra or somebody? Don't spend your own precious time on this, because there's somebody else who could do it for you. Write an article, like 600 words, about their project, and we'll put it in the next issue of Peace Magazine. Invite people who want to be trained to do group therapy for such people, trauma victims of war, to get in touch with you to be trained, and that we might be able to stir up some. I mean, some of you people right today may want to join, but it's more likely that we can do it by circulating an article in Peace Magazine.
I will do.
Get somebody to write it within the next 2 weeks for me.
I will do.
That's 600 words. Good. Okay.
That's writing a 600-word article is not the problem. It's
okay. Sure.
That's easy enough. Or easy, but
okay, good. And we just had a conversation with Alan Ware before you came, in which he said, I asked him, he was referring to the children who have been child soldiers and who are no longer welcome by their parents, or anybody else. And I asked him, you mean they're still training people? Training these soldiers? Yes. They're still doing it. It's not a past thing, it's current too.
Yeah. And not only that, but the parents are afraid of the kids, and a lot of the NGOs are afraid of the kids because they've been taught to kill. And so they go back in and they don't like something and they kill people.
Okay.
And these are young kids.
Okay.
Tragic.
All right.
Absolutely tragic.
It reminds me of the other thing I've been hearing about this Wagner group, the Russian soldiers who are 90% of them are convicts. This guy Prigozhin went to the prisons and said, I'll let you out if you fight for them. When they get home, now they've got weapons, and they then are really going to be a worse threat in society, because they've been released from prison and also armed, or at least they've had some better access to weapons. Same story with young people.
That's sad.
Yeah.
And the kids, nobody knows how to deal with them. Nobody's giving them love. Nobody's giving them positive attention. And that to my mind is precisely what they need, because they've been kidnapped. They've escaped because the family situations are so bad that the families can't support them in terms of food or in terms of anything else. They're not getting educated. And I can go on for another half hour like that with all the problems. And the point is that the NGOs simply don't know how to deal with them. Nobody knows how to deal with them.
Well, would you? I mean, if you were meeting these kids, I mean, if they're,
No, of course.
I wouldn't know what to
But
do.
the only thing that I'm suggesting is that you use a kind of a behavioral approach, and you use an approach that these kids haven't had in the past, where they get positive attention. And when they do something good, they get positive attention. And you invite them in not to kill or not to do things, but to get a little bit of education or to play chest or to get their negative feelings out. It's crucial that they get their feelings out because they all have very strong feelings. And if I'm looking at Alexei, the same thing is true. The Ukrainian kids are going through very similar things because the Ukrainian kids are all extremely highly traumatized. And so we've got to do something, and not only with the kids, but with the adults, because here, as I said, I was sitting in this restaurant 30 years after this war. There's still nobody's doing anything with the psychological side, and they're all getting drunk, and they're all screaming and escaping from their own horrors. And they were talking in this restaurant about some of the horrors they've been through. And of course, I've heard these stories thousands of times, literally. But nobody's doing anything. So instead of spending the money on the weapons, we could easily spend it on training barefoot therapists and on getting this stuff into communities. But the political will is precisely the opposite. The political will is to keep this alive because that's what you get votes for.
I think it has to be a matter of reaching enough people who'd be willing to do therapy if they knew that that's a real option. And let's just make it more, you need more publicity. I'll be your publicity. Somebody else want to be his publicity agent? Let everybody know that this is something he could offer training, and then you can sit at home and instead of watching CNN, you could turn on your your computer and do therapy for people in another part of the world.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah,
that's precisely what we're doing.
I think there are a lot of people who'd like to do that instead of playing bridge. We just told them. So let's get that onto it. Yeah.
I'll write the 600 words.
Okay, I want to say hi to Rose Dyson and Barbara Burkett, who've joined us recently. Hello, Rose. How have you been?
I've been fine, and I've been playing too much bridge.
Have you?
Or perhaps you would determine me as playing too much bridge, but otherwise I'm still busy with the Friends of Egerton Ryerson and concerning myself with publicity, as I read it recently in The Economist, the trends on university campuses toward diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice, and how these are distorted value systems that are being so strongly emphasized that there are those who worry that this is an infringement on freedom of expression. I suppose this is a very frivolous topic compared to what you've just been covering, but that's the sort of thing that's preoccupied me of late.
Well, I kind of share your attitude. We had an article about that by Robin Collins in one of the recent, not the current, but a previous issue, I believe, of Peace Magazine, because I think there is something to that point. This wokeness does have, you can overreact to it, but it's also something that I can see being concerned about. Anybody on this topic, this wokeness?
Yeah. I actually printed out and have distributed copies of Robin's article and quoted it in some of my writing.
Okay. Anybody else want to join in on that conversation? Do you all know about wokeness? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rose. And hello, Barbara. How are you? What's up?
Fine. Well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I was at a annual church vestry meeting, and then mostly busy with the Hiroshima Nagasaki Day Coalition.
Okay, so now here we are in February. You're already planning the Hiroshima Nagasaki Day for August.
That's right. Well, when you're late, in our planning this year.
Really? Why? I mean, I didn't think that was late. It shouldn't take that long.
Well, some of the people we like to attract have crowded schedules. So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, we've had a couple of Mike Nevin, who are some of you may know, our long-term secretary treasurer died a month or so.
Mike Nevin died?
Yes, yeah.
I
Was
didn't know that.
quite sudden.
He used to be on the Peace Magazine editorial board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And so that's, we have to be reassigning roles in the HNDA and so on. And Rosemary Keenan's mother died. So it's, you know, people have been preoccupied with other things at the moment, but.
Okay. Okay, fine. Who has something more you want to share now? Anybody yet? Maybe Joanna.
I wanted very much to respond to Alexi at one point, just because I feel I do, like many people, really obsess about the war and spend a lot of time reading news and being on YouTube and Timothy Snyder and, you know, all these different views, trying to, you know, to take it in. And one of the things that came up to me when you were talking about, you know, the parliamentary aspect and what are the alternatives, I remember when the war began, there was something I saw on YouTube of all the republics, like this atlas of all the republics that talked about this might lead to actual decentralization. And one of the things that just came to my mind, and coming out of my background of bioregionalism, was decentralization. And, you know,
I'm sorry, you're thinking of decentralization of Russia? Was that what you're referring to?
Yeah, thinking about all of the republics, you know, the possibility of autonomy, for example, and what that would look like, you know, not just in the West, but also in the East, you know, and the other republics. And also, I thought I spent a lot of time, way too much time, on YouTube watching young Russian YouTubers. Some of them, you know, in Russia, some of them leaving in the last few months or whatever, having to leave. But just these surveying constantly on the street, the different people, whether it was in rural Russia or whether it's in Moscow, the different perspectives that are there, and the enormous amount of education that will need to take place to replace the television, you know, the television and the newspapers of the government, you know, since that's the only source of news at this point. A mentor of mine has been Leopold Kohr, who was very much an advocate of small is beautiful. He was the first person. Schumacher was very much influenced by him, the idea of small is, and autonomy, more autonomy, kind of the opposite of what Russia has experienced, but also the tremendous educational, tremendous amount of education that would need to take place very carefully, in that sense that it wasn't like just what they would think of as brainwashing from the West, you know, in terms of their own self-determination in the future. Of course, they're going to have just an incredible amount to deal with the reconstruction of the Ukraine. I mean, just all where this leaves Russia economically, and it will leave it in so many ways. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you, Alexei. I just to be here for the discussion, I feel, you know, I was really happy to be here for that. And also, I wanted to mention to Peter, talking about the Thwaite glaciers and all the things that we read about all the time. I might read myself in the Washington Post or the New York Times on the climate, and just, you know, all the things that are basically disempowering because, it's hard to think about, that kind of sea level rise that could actually happen unexpectedly way before we imagine that those things could happen. A lot of people like to put them way off in their mind, way off into the future.
Yeah.
And the tremendous amount of, immigration, there's already immigration taking place to do with climate change, whether it's people leaving California or Miami and moving, to other states and so on. And that will become even, just so much more dramatic. So I guess what I'm left with when I'm hearing it is just to say that possibility of empowering people in terms of participation, in stabilizing the climate. And then that comes back down to remineralization for your garden, growing your own food, growing nutrient dense food, projects would allow you to take steps to participate. And I think, like the youth protests as well for climate change and that sort of thing that was also mentioned. So we have these different ends of the spectrum of catastrophe to what can I do? What can I as an individual do? And I see within your network all the extraordinary, your network, which I'm not so familiar with, of Pugwash, of people who are engaged, engaged in the things that they can be passionate about. And, what it means to kind of love those visions into reality, because that's what we need to do. That's the kind of action, that's where it needs to come from.
Thank you.
I am a little late coming in, but I would be very interested in hearing Alexei maybe repeat himself in terms of his take on what's happening with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now.
I'd be interested in knowing more about what is happening in Warsaw in response, how people are holding up and how much commitment there is, or how much fragmentation there is among different perspectives in Warsaw. What's the climate like politically there now?
I mean, in the Russian diaspora, or
about the war, all the different people speaking about the war.
Well, I really see that there is a lot of alignment between different groups, at least Russian-speaking groups. I mean, Poles. I've met with only positive perception of like my own path, of my of the way I've come here. So people really are very friendly, and I see that there is no quarrel, no real conflict, which is typical of any discussions of that kind in Russia. As I said, the Russians lack a certain culture of discussion. Sometimes it seems a certain obstacle to parliamentarianism, to a really civilized way of collective thinking, because most discussions, even at some lower level, boil down to some petty conflicts, trying to understand who the opponent is, what background he has to say so or so. So it diverts the attention from really meaningful things, and maybe this is one of the sad legacies of the Soviet Union. I don't know, but here people are friendly, people are constructive, and at yesterday's event there were Poles, there were Russians, Belarusians speaking together, standing together, shoulder to shoulder. And at least people are prepared to discuss things in a civilized way. Maybe that's just the new generation came into being which didn't have the experience of that Soviet time. I don't know, but it starts to bring some fruits, hopefully.
You know, you spent 2 months or so in Istanbul before you went to Warsaw. And I wonder how you would compare the public spirit in Istanbul with Warsaw.
Well, suffice it to say that yesterday there, or better said, from Friday to Sunday, over these 3 days, on one of the days, there was an event dedicated to opposition to the war in, let me think, some 120 cities all around the world, but not in Turkey. Not in Turkey, not in Istanbul, not in Ankara, which means that any meaningful diaspora, any meaningful political immigration is virtually absent from Turkey.
Well, they let you guys in, so
They do.
I would have thought that was a good sign. But they don't let you organize while you're there. Is that the general idea, or they oppose what you're trying to organize in favor of?
It might be that the government is opposing, because it's kind of an authoritarian government, probably not to the degree that Putin is authoritarian, but still the Turkish government is very much in favor of certain, not in favor of free speech, not in favor of gatherings. Anyway, they have their own problems with that. Probably that's one of the reasons. The other reason, which comes to my mind, is that political life, political immigration is very negligible in Turkey. Politically.
Really? I thought there were a whole bunch of you guys when you were there. I've heard that there are Russians all over the place. It's not comparable to Warsaw.
No, I think in Warsaw there are lots of Russian immigrants who came here for political reasons. But in Istanbul, I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I offend someone, but I had the opinion that people just come there to Istanbul for mere fear, and some of them are opportunistic. They don't really want to engage in politics, and Istanbul is not the best place for that. And maybe that's the other reason why. One reason is that the Turkish government is not willing to give opportunities to those people, and the other reason that the people are just not the sort who would not the sort of dissidents who would just be willing to organize something in Turkey.
That's interesting. Also, I would think Erdogan has tried to be the kind of a mediator early on. I don't know whether he's still trying it. Same with
I don't know either.
With Israel. So there's this effort to see Turkey and Israel as trying to mediate or be stay on good terms with Russia. So maybe that's part of it. I wonder. I don't even know about whether that's still the case in Israel. Everybody's so concerned in Israel now about the downfall of democracy and of what Netanyahu is trying to do with the justice system. So I haven't heard about any effort to try to mediate. Does anybody know about either Turkey or now China? Now China is saying, well, we have a peace plan. Have you read their peace plan? I actually, some of the people I know
very
in
generic.
the peace movement are not totally in disagreement. They think there's good stuff in it. I haven't read it.
It's very generic, actually. I've read it, but I found it very for all the good things against all the bad things. Nothing particular, nothing really meaningful, nothing specific about the situation. Okay, let's respect the internationally recognized borders of states. What does it mean in this case? Shall the Russians withdraw? Or so they just big words without really any particular details behind them.
Well,
That's
as
what
long as they don't actually provide more ammunition to Putin, which it looks like they may.
Currently.
If they just want to talk, that's okay with me.
Currently.
What else on this? Some of you may have thoughts about China, Turkey, or Israel.
Well, what do you think the purpose of the China resolution has been? Mostly for diplomatic appearance purposes and nothing more?
Maybe it's like an emerging empire which wants to play a more pivotal role in global affairs. That's what it seems to be like. Like being a referee, probably trying to because China has always historically has mostly pursued the policy of self-restraint, just the way the United States had done in the 19th century. They didn't really mess with the affairs anywhere else other than their own borders. China used to do the same thing, but now I think they're trying to emerge as a global power. They're trying to make a claim to that.
Yeah.
I may be wrong.
Well, there's room for a new leadership in the world. I don't know who. I just assume it not be one nation, but
Sure.
some sort of international coalition of people. You know.
Well, there has been some emphasis on or coverage on CNN anyway on China's interest in developing and exercising what they perceive to be the same kind of soft power that the United States has used over the years to spread its influence around the globe. I think I've mentioned this on a previous occasion. There's been a book written by a journalist based in California called The Red Carpet, and there's a lot of focus on the extent to which Chinese are investing in Hollywood productions of one kind or another, because these then get distribution globally, and that's with a lot of editing, I suppose, in terms of the script and so on. But there's also been commentators on the subject of how soft power has not been exercised enough in terms of Putin's ambitions. That's something that he seems to have evaded him entirely.
At a certain point, yes.
You're thinking Putin should have used soft power more? Is that the argument?
Well, that was that perceived, as I understand it, as the approach to influence in the world today, with the technology being what it is and so on. And here he is using heavy-handed, decades-old forms of artillery and everything. In other words, that's so much. Yesterday's approach to aggression, if you like. Not that aggression is a particularly good thing, but it's really a throwback to, well, you've heard all kinds of news commentators refer to this as a war that's not unlike World War I in the way it's being fought.
Well, he doesn't. I agree. He hasn't used soft power in the sense of buttering up other countries by playing nicely with them, but or flattering them or anything like that. He's so paranoid he can't do that. But he certainly has used non-lethal weaponry in the form of disinformation and
election
interference and trolls and trying to stir up conflict in other countries. He's good at that, and I would have to say that scares me more.
In fact, what happened in Ukraine? He spent like lots of billions of dollars on spilling billions of dollars into what was perceived to be Ukrainian elite, bribing the Ukrainian elite. The FSB, so the KGB's successor, was deceiving him, taking the money, because the system is corrupt, and they were reporting to him that everything is ready. People will just if only your tanks cross the border, people will be welcoming them with flowers. You won't have to fight. You won't have to use any violence. You just people are waiting for you, man. And so lots of and he chose to listen to the voices that kind of fit into this concert of voices. All the opposing voices, he told them, "I know better," and that was the result. He was the corrupt system led to. The corruption in the system led to complete misinformation and complete failure of conveying that a disaster would happen.
So in other words, that's one of the reasons Kiev didn't fall in 4 days as he'd anticipated.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes. Now, what do you make of the corruption that has been addressed by Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian prime minister, more lately? I mean, that's been, I think, referred to as a throwback to Soviet influences that haven't been completely cleansed from the system, so to speak. But
right.
Are those some of the elements you're talking about?
Well, there is yes. I think it would be fair to say that it's a shared legacy of many post-Soviet countries, corruption at many levels, and kind of corruption not only in financial terms, but also in terms of the habit of creating a false image of reality. As, for example, in the Soviet Union, there was planned economy, and there was a tradition of reporting fake numbers of cattle, of crops, of goods that have been produced in a certain republic or in a certain area. And because if you reported a bigger amount of crops or goods or harvests, you got promoted, and so the statistics was completely unreal, and that tradition of Soviet times probably played out, leading to paving the way to the war, because the tradition of the officials is to create a fake picture of the reality.
Interesting.
But when it comes to Soviet efforts to create dissent or dissension, really conflict, that's actually created so as to weaken and cause trouble in another country, which apparently that is, really a policy, a practice that was deliberately practiced by Russia. Maybe it still is. I don't know. How would you? I don't even know how you would fight back against that kind of thing. Do you retaliate in kind? How do you defend yourself against it without infringing on freedom of speech or other kinds of public discourse? I just think to me that is a whole new ball game, a whole different ball game, and one that where the rules of international relations and warfare that we sort of understand are not even relevant.
I want to answer Joanna, and I wanted to say that we were talking about this stuff 50 years ago, or we were talking about this in the late 60s, and we're talking not only about climate migration in California, but whole islands in the South Seas are now having to be evacuated because of climate change. BBC is making this very clear on some of their programs. It's come out And I remember demonstrations in the late 60s when I was a teenager, where we were talking about precisely these kinds of issues. And Greenpeace was talking about this in the early 70s. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. So, yeah, what can I say? Second thing, which I think will interest people from here, have a look at BBC on the Americans who participated in the Vietnam War who are now moving to Vietnam. There is a documentary on World Service about this.
Never heard of that. What's the idea? What's going on?
What's going on for about the past 10 or 15 years, apparently, Americans who participated in the Vietnam War as soldiers are now moving to Vietnam to do voluntary work and to take part in their society.
Is this like expiation for their guilt?
Some of it, yeah. Some of it, because they found out at the end of the war that they didn't believe in the war. And now in their retirement, they've begun to come back. They've begun to go back to Vietnam.
Wow.
Very interesting documentary.
I had never heard of it. How many folks are we talking about?
A couple of hundred at least.
Wow. Good for them. It takes that's a real measure of character, isn't it? To say,
Sure.
because I think, and I'm not sure that the US as a whole has gone through any kind of soul searching about the culpability for so many of these invasions and things. There's a lot there to answer for.
Yeah, this is, as I say, it's a very interesting documentary from lots of standpoints. So please do listen to it. It's on World Service.
Put it on on the chat if you can, so we can.
Yeah.
I should tell people that it takes me a little while to edit these 2-hour shows because they're longer than the others. But I'll put them on our website to savetheworld.ca as probably within a week, and then I will put up the chat in the comments column. If you scroll down, when you go to savetheworld.ca, look for Global Town Hall, February 2023, and it was in the search bar, and it'll take you to the edited version of this, which won't be that different, but trim it out a little bit. And then if you finished watching it or you're through, scroll down to a little place that says if you want to make a comment, push this button, and it'll take you someplace to a comment column. So put in your heading on the comment column that you're speaking about the conversations that took place on this particular show, the Global Town Hall of February 2023. That's your title. And then put whatever you want to say there. You can have a long conversation there, going back and forth. You can reply to each other and stuff. So I will put the chat box information there. So everybody, if you want, look for references to something like this documentary that he's going to post, you'll see the link to it. You can do that. Do you have access to it, Charles?
I do somewhere. I have to go, but I wanted to make one more comment. Alexei.
Sure.
If you get a group, first of all, it seems like we're going to get a group. There's somebody in the States who has great contacts in Kiev and Lvov with peace groups, and she wants to get a group together. If you know people, we also may get a group in Warsaw together. If you have people in Warsaw who would like to have an educational group on the psychology, contact me. You have my email, so
we'll talk about it.
We can talk about it, you and I, because I would really this is going to be very big, and this is something I very much want to do. And something very interesting. There was a guy in Kiev who joined another group of mine who is for conscientious objectors in the Ukraine. Guy called Yuri.
Starts with an S, right?
No, starts with a K.
Then I don't know.
Kozenko, I'm not sure. I can look it up, but there is a conscientious objectors group in Kiev. Remarkably.
It's a real pleasure to be with you again. I just love you all and appreciate what you're doing. So carry on, and I'll see you in another brother. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Project Save the World produces these shows, and this is episode number 548. You can watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. People share information there also about 6 global issues. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. Project Save the World also produces a quarterly online publication, Peace Magazine. You can subscribe for $20 Canadian per year. Just go to pressreader.com on your browser, and in the search bar, enter the word peace. You'll see buttons to click to subscribe.